Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today and helping me on my journey. I am working on a doctorate in education and Ed.D. through Liberty University online, and you are here helping me with doing a teaching demonstration. And all of you know me from this or that class, and the teaching demonstration has to involve some of the teaching modalities that we have been learning this semester. So I've chosen to talk to you on the topic of time-limited dynamic psychotherapy, which is a subsection, if you will, of brief therapy. And we have some learning outcomes that if I do my job well, you all will be able to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate what you will have learned today. So by analyzing, you're going to be looking at the client-therapist interactions with regard to transference and countertransference. Not to worry, I'll explain those two terms momentarily. And you will be able to do that because I'm going to be showing you a video, and we'll take this a step at the time. Synthesize means you will synthesize or put together what you will have heard, seen, and discussed, and that's, putting it together. Evaluating is that you will have learned a certain amount of information, and you will be able to have an appreciation of what you have learned. So, at the end of the day, at the end of this half hour, you will have gained knowledge, which of course is remembering. You will comprehend, you will understand what it is that you have learned. And of course, I've already talked about analyzing, but applying, you'll be able to understand through a little group thing that's going to happen. And finally, the other two have been explained already, at least to the degree that I need to explain them at the moment, because they'll make better and better sense as we go along. So, time-limited dynamic psychotherapy is a counseling model that looks at cyclical maladaptive patterns. For short, we're calling them CMPs. And that is simply how a person has a habit of interacting with others. And it's maladaptive, it's dysfunctional, it's not working. And the video that we're going to look at is going to look at these maladaptive patterns through both the lens of the client as well as the therapist. Transference is something that happens from the client, foisted upon the therapist, which means because of the client's life history, life ways of being with people, they might find a negative or a positive when they first walk into the therapist's office for the first time. So the therapist might remind them of their great relationship with their mother or father, if it's a male, or negative. It'll remind them of their relationship with their mother or father. So transference is the client foisting their stuff onto the therapist. On the other hand, countertransference is when it's the therapist who finds some dynamic, some thing about the appearance or the way the client talks or acts or body language or size, or there is something that triggers within the therapist either a negative or a positive. And so the video that we're about to view is one in which, as you have your questions before you, and now that you've gotten a drift of transference versus countertransference, you will be making little notes to yourself. I'm not to receive those back. They're for you only, and then you as a group. And so after we watch the video, what's going to happen is, I haven't counted 16 in the room. No, looks like 14. Anyway, we're going to group up in threes, and there'll be a group or two that has to have 4. So 3 or 4 is the grouping, and I'll explain what you'll be doing as a group later on. Right now, we will view a video that is about close to 6 minutes, slightly under 6 minutes.
So this left you now living with Susan.
Yes.
And what was that relationship like with her?
Well, I can't say I was the best father in the world. I never hit her.
Uh-huh.
I was, always saw that she had good clothes and plenty of toys. And
So you kind of raised her single-handedly.
Yeah.
That's not an easy task to do, to be a single parent these days.
then as she started getting older, she started spending more time with her friends, her older friends.
Yes, yes. And this is kind of what happened before you were hospitalized. You got evicted and your daughter left. I'm beginning to get a picture of a man who views himself as the proverbial cork floating on the sea of life, without will or direction, victimized by others or just bad luck. I test this hypothesis by seeing how he responds to my invitation to be more active in the treatment and collaborative with me.
I brought you some coffee this morning.
Coffee? Why coffee this morning? I suspect that Mr. Johnson is attempting to mitigate last week's expression of negative feelings, perhaps fearing that without an apology, I may abandon him. I therefore do not automatically thank him for the coffee, but inquire as to the significance of the gesture.
I've been such a handful lately.
Uh-huh.
I thought maybe you use a little coffee. I know I'm not making much progress. I'm really trying, but it's so hard. I don't know why you would want to continue seeing me in therapy.
Why I'd want to continue seeing you? Why wouldn't I want to continue seeing you?
Well, I don't seem to be making any progress, and you're certainly trying hard. I don't mean to be ungrateful.
Uh-huh. And when were you ungrateful?
Well, I never should have said anything about that medicine and the stool softener. That's not your job. I just shouldn't have said anything about it. And I don't want you to feel that I'm ungrateful.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So you're concerned that you seemed ungrateful?
Yes.
What gave you the impression that I thought you were being ungrateful?
Oh, no. You didn't give me that impression. You're too nice to do that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So it sounds like maybe you're concerned that I might have been upset with you for expressing your frustration and anger back then around the constipation.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the coffee is a peace offering?
Yeah, sort of. And my kids aren't seeing me much anymore, and this is my only outlet.
So you're telling us how important this relationship has become to you.
Yes,
And sounds like you're very worried about jeopardizing it.
very, yes. Yeah.
And this seems to be a pattern now that we've seen over and over again in here, where you are concerned that you're going to make me angry and that somehow I might retaliate against you. And we've also talked about how it happens with your kids. And I'm wondering where you learned this pattern, how long you've carried this inside of you. At this juncture, given that Mr. Johnson has some new experiences and understandings of his interactive style, I think it's timely to explore the origins of his subservient passivity. I'm wondering if there's a time, and you might want to think back to your past, even to your childhood, if there was a time when you learned that you had to hold in the anger, you had to keep your mouth shut, because if you didn't do that, you were afraid something terrible would happen. What's going on for you right now?
I was thinking about my father.
So, that excerpt is sufficient enough time for you to have potentially, and I noticed some people jotting notes down, so potentially for you to have thought at any rate that you've seen some transference out of him, and maybe whether or not you saw counter transference out of her. So going back to our PowerPoint for a moment, these cyclical maladaptive patterns are also, they play into a person's view of God, because if their patterns with their father, whether it's a son or a daughter, the pattern of interaction with the father, if it's been distant, malfunctioning, maladaptive, dysfunctional, all those fancy words, if that has been the case, it's hard for them to just suddenly do a U-turn in their concept of fatherness and do a U-turn and see God as loving and warm and not distant, close and personal and caring and protective, all the stuff fathers are supposed to be. It's hard for them to contemplate God in that way. And we see here that studies on that very topic have been done by Moriarty and Davis. And they gave case samples of counseling sessions with people who had the very issue of not being able to relate to God in a loving, close way because of their life history. So that is all about transference, that inability to relate to God as Father. And so this TLDP approach is a psychodynamic approach, meaning it is an approach that recognizes you and I are who we are as a result of our childhood. Now, what we're going to do is section off, and I won't need to tell you what, just divide up. Let's try to divide up in threes and see how that works. And whoever's left, it gets to be a 4. So just divide up. And what you're going to be doing upon being in your threesome, or if it's a foursome, is talking to one another about the questions on the handout. And I'm going to give you possibly as much as 7 minutes to do so. And here's how we're going to, I just remembered that another focus is let's have you three start from the bottom up of the list. Because if everybody starts at the top and time runs out, you don't get to, talk about all of them. This way we have them all covered. So this group and this group start at the bottom. Everybody else, the other two groups, start at the top, and hopefully everything gets discussed. You're right. Actually, yes, it does, because she is mandating that we do between 28 and 30 minutes. And if you cut it off, she won't know. And because this is important for her purposes, because she wants to see how I am during the discussion.
Having you as a teacher again.
Yeah, thank you.
That was my very first class a few years back. And I was in your class before.
Yeah, you were. Your very first one was me? Mm-hmm. Wow. Looks like I didn't ruin you for life. So
I was in the nursing program, and then I'm going into occupational therapy now in the fall. So I just needed to take like a couple more prereqs.
Okay. So great. Wonderful.
I saw that you were the professor.
Yeah. The ones I'll be teaching in the future are probably ones you've already taken. Yeah. Couple more minutes. "30 seconds. Oh, it was real. All right. So now, in each group, by the virtue of human nature being what it is, there's always a person who's not at all afraid to be the spokesman for the group. So, so that's what's going to happen. So, I will start with my first group here to my left. And since you started from the bottom up, whoever's going to speak, and it doesn't have to only be one, but start somebody with, how would you describe Dr. Levinson's body language and speech?
So we said that Dr.
Sorry.
So we said that Dr. Levinson's body language and her speech was very, very calm. She had a lot of really slow movements. She seemed to really try to understand the client and seemed really compassionate about it. And overall, she was just like a sweet-natured kind of human.
The same question or question number 4?
Go ahead with the question number 4.
Okay. For us, the client seems to be sad, he was lost, he didn't want the therapist to think that she was upset to him, and also he had a fear or maybe people thinking that he was negative. So maybe it has to do something with his father, and maybe he imitated his father. Something happened because he was talking about his children too, that he was trying to be maybe better.
Yeah, he was especially apologetic. He was a little boy in a man's body, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And therefore, just a group at large responds, show of hands. Do you think he was demonstrating transference? Duh, he really was. Here's a cup of coffee. I've been a bad boy. He was transferring father / maybe motherness onto the therapist. So we definitely saw transference going on.
I was telling the group that he also showed he didn't really apologize. He kept saying I should have never did this. I should have never did that. And in the first session, he talks about being a single parent. He made sure his daughter had the best clothes and the best toys. And the cup of coffee represented to me was that he was, in other terms, not trying to buy the therapist out, but to say, like you said, I did something wrong. Here's this to make up for it. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, when he messed up with his daughter, the same thing would happen is I bought my daughter out. I bought her the best toys. I bought her the best clothes, and she still left.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And what Johnny said a moment ago about the calm, comfortable, slow-paced voice of the therapist, that's the kind of therapist to be, because we want there to be nothing that comes out of us as professionals to be intimidating or scary. We want to be peaceful and calm and soothing, because even by doing so, the client still was left with his issues that he had to try to deal with. And so, question number 3. Let's go to our group back in the corner here. Question number 3. What did the presentation of coffee, I kind of talked about that, what did the presentation of coffee to the therapist really represent? But go ahead and say something about that, Tyler.
Yeah, so we kind of went over it just now. But we said the fact that he felt he was ungrateful in the last session and that he seemed maybe rude, that was his way of apologizing. And so when she received the coffee from him, she didn't say thank you by giving him that satisfaction of saying it was okay. She asked him why, and she kind of said it was like a peace offering for him. And that was basically her way of trying to get him to open up about why he did that.
Right, right. So very good. He was trying hard to appease vicariously, meaning if I say the right thing, act the right way, demonstrate my remorse for whatever my remorse is about, obviously something to do with relationships, then if the therapist demonstrates that she's happy with me, then I have kind of fixed my relationship with my parent or parents' issue vicariously, substitutionally, through the therapist. We're now going to go to this table. How, if at all, was the client's transference manifested?
We said that he was afraid of seeing ungrateful, and that he was fearful that the therapist would no longer want to have sessions with him because of his relationship, like you said, with his father or mother. And then we also said with his children, because he was used to people leaving him. Very,
very good insight. And finally, this is a whole bunch of people for 3, but anyway, that's all right. What did Dr. Levinson do to keep her counter-transference at bay, in check?
I would say like she just mostly was very, not like sympathetic, but very calming. Every time he was self-doubting himself, she would reassure him like, but why are you doing this? Like she's showing him like, it's okay, like everything's okay, like you can talk to me. Like she was just very calm and collective. And you know, when he was, well, I can't figure out why I'm doing this, and she was just like, she always wanted to find deeper, and just showing him like, it's okay to talk about your feeling, and everything's gonna be fine. So I think she was just very sympathetic and just showing him like things are gonna be okay at the end of the day, and just be calm and collective. So.
And Miles, go right ahead.
Yeah, she was also very empathetic with him. And she did a lot of reflecting, you know, and restating what he was saying to her. She was also, her body movement, she limited it. You know, constantly looked at him.
Right.
You know, she wasn't yawning or rubbing her eyes or any of that.
Very sharp eye contact.
Yes. So, you can take it. Out of what we have learned today, you now, obviously, this isn't designed to, okay, now you can go out and counsel with this model. That's not the point. The point is that you can at least understand or appreciate the model better. And if that is the goal, which it is, show of hands where you think you sort of have a little bit of understanding of TLDP. Awesome. I've done my job. Thank you very much. This is the end of the teaching demonstration.